The bedroom door stood ajar. Just 3 inches of shadow and golden light spilling into the hallway. Alessia Moretti's fingers trembled against the ornate handle, her other hand resting instinctively on the gentle swell of her belly. She'd come home early to surprise him. Candles, his favorite wine, news about their baby's first ultrasound tucked in her purse like a precious secret. But the sounds stopped her cold. A woman's laugh, low, intimate, her husband's voice, that voice that had whispered promises against her skin for 3 years, murmuring something she couldn't quite hear. Alessia pushed the door open. The scene before her crystallized into a single, devastating image. Silk sheets tangled around 2 bodies. Candlelight flickering across bare skin. The mistress, blonde, bold, draped across her husband like she belonged there, looked up first. Her red lips curved into something that might have been triumph. Riccardo's dark eyes found his wife's face. The Italian script tattooed across his neck. Famiglia soprattutto, family above all, seemed to mock her from across the room. Alessia didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply looked at him. At the man who controlled half of Milan's underworld, whose inked knuckles had ended lives, whose forearm tattoos told stories of blood oaths and broken enemies. And she decided. Her hand pressed firmer against her belly. Then she turned and walked away. Before we continue with what happened next, if you're enjoying this story, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything. The click of her heels against marble echoed through the Moretti estate like a countdown. Each step carried her further from the bedroom, further from the life she'd believed in, further from the woman she'd been 30 seconds ago. Behind her, she heard him curse, heard sheets rustle, heard her name, Alessia, called once, sharp with something that might have been panic. She didn't turn around. The grand staircase stretched before her, 23 steps of imported Italian marble that had cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. She'd counted them once, early in their marriage, when everything about this world still felt like a fairy tale. Now they felt like an escape route. Alessia, stop. His voice was closer now. She could picture him, shirt hastily buttoned, those tattooed hands running through his slicked-back dark hair. The cool, calculated man who made grown men tremble was chasing his pregnant wife through their home like a desperate fool. She kept walking. The front door loomed ahead. Her car keys sat on the entry table, right where she'd left them an hour ago, when she'd still believed in forever. Alessia, please. His hand closed around her wrist. She stopped, not because he'd caught her, but because she chose to stop. The distinction mattered. It was perhaps the first real choice she'd made in 3 years of marriage. Slowly, deliberately, she turned to face him. Riccardo Moretti stood before her, all 6 feet 3 inches of him radiating barely contained chaos. His olive skin was flushed. His sharp jaw was tight. Those cold, unreadable eyes, the ones that made rivals flinch and business partners sweat, were searching her face with something dangerously close to fear. Let me explain. The words hung between them. Alessia looked down at his hand on her wrist, at the intricate tattoos that crawled across his knuckles. Symbols of loyalty, of power, of the empire he'd built on blood and promises. She'd kissed those knuckles once. She'd believed those promises. There's nothing to explain. Her voice came out steady, calm, foreign even to her own ears. I saw everything I needed to see. It's not. She doesn't mean. Does it matter? The question silenced him. Alessia gently, firmly removed her wrist from his grip. Her brown eyes met his without wavering, without tears, without the emotional collapse he was clearly bracing for. I'm leaving now. Don't follow me. You're my wife. Yes. She let the word settle. And you just reminded me exactly what that means to you. She picked up her car keys. Alessia, you're 6 months pregnant. You can't just. Watch me. The door closed behind her with a soft click. No slam. No drama. Just finality. The night air hit her lungs like ice water. Milan spread before her, glittering and indifferent. A city that had witnessed centuries of betrayals far worse than this. Alessia walked to her car. A sleek black Mercedes he'd gifted her on their 2nd anniversary, and slid behind the wheel. Her hands were steady as she turned the key. Her heartbeat was measured, controlled, foreign. The woman who drove away from the Moretti estate was not the same woman who'd arrived 90 minutes earlier. A smile on her lips and baby news in her purse. That woman was gone. In her place sat someone harder, colder. Someone who had just watched her entire world collapse and decided, in that infinite moment of devastation, that she would not collapse with it. She drove for an hour without destination. The streets of Milan blurred past. Ancient architecture and modern steel, churches and nightclubs, history and hedonism woven together like the contradictions of her marriage. Eventually, she found herself at a hotel. 5 stars. Anonymous. The kind of place where the staff didn't ask questions and discretion was built into the room rate. She checked in under her maiden name, Alessia Bellini, the woman she'd been before she became property of the Moretti Empire. Her suite overlooked the city lights. She stood at the window, one hand pressed to the glass, the other cradling the swell where her daughter grew. Yes, a daughter. That was the news she'd been so eager to share, and she let herself feel. Not cry, not break, just feel. The pain was enormous. Tidal. A grief so vast it could have drowned her if she'd let it pull her under. She didn't let it. Instead, she catalogued it, examined it, turned it over in her mind like evidence at a crime scene. 3 years of marriage. 2 years of trying to conceive. 6 months of pregnancy hormones. Morning sickness, swollen ankles, and the terrifying joy of feeling their child move inside her. And he'd been sleeping with another woman. How long? She wondered. Weeks? Months? From the beginning, the mistress had looked too comfortable in their bed. Too unsurprised by the interruption. This wasn't a first time. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. And Alessia had been too naive or too in love to see it. Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. Ricardo's name flashed across the screen like a warning. She watched the notifications pile up, calls, texts, more calls, until finally, she powered the device off entirely. Tomorrow she would deal with the wreckage. Tonight she would sleep, or try to. She didn't sleep. Instead, she lay in the dark, her mind cycling through every moment of her marriage with the cold precision of a forensic analyst. The late nights he'd blamed on business. The phone calls he'd taken in other rooms. The way he'd sometimes look at her like she was precious beyond measure, and other times like she was furniture. She'd made excuses for all of it. He runs an empire, she'd told herself. He carries burdens I can't imagine. He loves me in his way. His way. What a foolish phrase that had been. The baby shifted inside her, a small foot pressing against her ribs. Alessia covered the spot with her palm, and for the first time since walking into that bedroom, she felt tears prick her eyes. Not for herself, for her daughter, for the family this child would now be born into, fractured before it even began. For the father who would never be the man Alessia had believed him to be. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm so sorry." But even as the tears fell, something else was crystallizing inside her. Resolve. She would not raise her daughter to accept betrayal as normal. She would not teach her that a woman's value decreased the moment she was inconvenient. She would not model the kind of silent, suffering devotion that her own mother had demonstrated through decades of her father's indiscretions. Alessia had watched her mother wither, had sworn she'd never repeat that pattern, and she wouldn't. Whatever came next, whatever battle Ricardo Moretti wanted to wage to keep her, she would not go quietly. She was done being quiet. Morning came gray and soft, the kind of Milan morning that felt suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. Alessia showered, dressed, examined herself in the hotel mirror with clinical attention. She looked different. Same long dark hair, same deep brown eyes, same elegant features that had once caught a Mafia boss's attention across a crowded gallery opening. But something behind those features had shifted, hardened, the softness that Ricardo had always praised. "You're so gentle, Cara, so pure, so unlike this world," had been replaced by something sharper. Good, she thought. Soft hadn't protected her. Soft had made her a fool. She ordered room service. Black coffee, fruit, toast. Her appetite was mechanical, but the baby needed nutrients regardless of emotional devastation. Then she powered on her phone. 47 missed calls. 32 text messages. 3 voicemails. She ignored the calls. Skimmed the texts, variations of "where are you" and "we need to talk and I can explain," and deleted them without response. The voicemails she listened to. The first was chaos. Ricardo's voice rough, panicked, words tumbling over each other. "Alessia, please call me. I know what you saw, I know how it looked. But please just call me. Tell me where you are. Tell me you're safe." The second was quieter, controlled. The Mafia boss reasserting himself over the desperate husband. "I've sent men to look for you. Not to bring you back against your will. Just to confirm you're safe." The baby. "Our baby? Alessia, you can hate me, but don't punish our child. Call me." The third was different. Hollow. "I sat in your closet last night, surrounded by your clothes. Your perfume." Couldn't. A long pause. "I've never begged for anything in my life. But I'm begging now. Come home. Please. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right." Alessia played that message twice. Then she deleted it and made her first call. To a lawyer. The divorce attorney came highly recommended by a college friend who'd escaped a bad marriage years ago. He was calm, professional, and completely unfazed when Alessia mentioned her husband's name. Ricardo Moretti. He wrote it down without a flicker. The Ricardo Moretti. "Yes, Mrs. Moretti. Bellini." The correction came sharp. "I'll be using my maiden name going forward." The lawyer nodded slowly. "Ms. Bellini, you understand that divorcing a man of your husband's stature presents unique challenges. I understand that my husband controls significant portions of Milan's underground economy. I understand that he has powerful allies and dangerous enemies. I understand that the prenuptial agreement I signed 3 years ago, while somewhat disadvantageous, contains clauses regarding infidelity that may work in my favor." The lawyer's eyebrows rose. "You've done your research." "I had a long night." He leaned back, studying her with new respect. "What outcome are you hoping for?" Alessia considered the question carefully. What did she want? Money? She'd never cared about money. Property? The houses and cars and jewelry felt tainted now, monuments to a lie. Full custody of my daughter. That could be difficult. Men like your husband. Men like my husband sign prenuptial agreements that specifically address custody in cases of documented infidelity. Paragraph 47, if I recall correctly. Now the lawyer smiled, thin, professional, but genuine. You read the prenup, cover to cover. 3 times since last night. She smoothed her hand over her belly. My daughter will not be raised by a man who treats commitment as optional. She will not spend weekends with her father's mistresses. She will not learn that love means betrayal dressed in expensive suits and pretty apologies. Ms. Bellini, I have to ask, are you certain? Divorce proceedings against a man like Ricardo Moretti will be protracted. Expensive. Potentially dangerous. If there's any chance of reconciliation, there isn't. The words fell like stones. The lawyer nodded and pulled out fresh forms. Then let's begin. 3 days passed. Alessia remained at the hotel, working with her attorney, ignoring Ricardo's increasingly desperate communications and quietly beginning to dismantle the life she'd built. She accessed their joint accounts, or tried to, found them frozen. Of course, he was already making moves, already trying to force her hand by controlling resources. What he didn't know was that Alessia had money of her own. A trust from her grandfather, carefully protected, never touched during the marriage because she'd never needed it. She needed it now. On the 4th day, her attorney called with news. Ricardo had hired his own legal team. 4 lawyers, all top tier, all ready to fight the divorce with every weapon available. He was contesting infidelity. On what grounds? Alessia asked, her voice carefully blank. His position is that what you witnessed was a one-time incident, a moment of weakness, that the woman in question, a Valentina Rossi, was an employee who took advantage of your husband's vulnerability during a period of marital stress. Marital stress. His words. Alessia laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. What stress exactly? The stress of having a devoted wife? The stress of an uncomplicated pregnancy? The stress of being given everything and appreciating nothing? Ms. Bellini. He's lying. That woman was not an employee. She was his mistress. How long, I don't know yet. But I intend to find out. How? Alessia smiled. It was the first smile she'd allowed herself in days, and it felt sharp enough to cut. My husband isn't the only one with resources. He just thinks he is. A week after the night that changed everything, Alessia walked back into the Moretti estate. Not to reconcile, to collect her belongings. She'd called ahead, a courtesy she barely owed him, and specified the time she'd arrive. Noon. Broad daylight. Witnesses everywhere. She brought her attorney and 2 security personnel hired independently, paid from her grandfather's trust. Ricardo was waiting. He stood in the foyer, tall and immaculate. Every inch the Mafia boss despite the shadows under his eyes and the new lines around his mouth. His dark hair was slicked back as always. His charcoal suit was flawless. The tattoos on his neck and hands seemed darker than she remembered. The Italian script and symbolic markings standing out against his olive skin like brands. Family above all. The hypocrisy choked her. Alessia. Her name in his mouth sounded different now. Careful. Desperate. Can we? I'm here for my personal effects. Clothing. Jewelry that was gifted by my family. Documents from the study. It should take approximately 2 hours. After that, I'll be leaving. Alessia, please. My attorney will remain in the main hall. My security will accompany me throughout the estate. Any interference will be documented and added to our legal proceedings. Ricardo's jaw tightened. She watched the muscles flex beneath his stubble, watched him fight the instinct to command, to control, to make the situation bend to his will through sheer force of personality. For the first time in their entire relationship, she felt no urge to soothe him. I've canceled the women who work here for the day, he said stiffly. The estate is private. I hoped we might talk. There's nothing to discuss. You're carrying my child. The words hung between them. Alessia let them hang. Then, quietly, I'm aware. I'm also aware that our child's conception didn't prevent you from sleeping with another woman. So forgive me if I don't find your sudden paternal concern particularly compelling. She turned to climb the stairs. His voice stopped her. I love you. Alessia paused on the 3rd step. She didn't turn around. I don't believe you. It's true. Whatever else you think of me, whatever you saw, I love you. I have always loved you. Then we have very different definitions of love. She continued climbing. I'll be finished by 2 o'clock. Collecting her belongings was surgical. Alessia moved through the estate. This palace of marble and silk and blood money that had been her home for 3 years, like a ghost cataloging its former life. The closet first. Her clothes packed efficiently into luggage. The jewelry from her grandmother, carefully wrapped. The photo album from their wedding, left behind. She didn't want it. The study next. Her documents, her passport, her laptop. The drawer where she kept personal correspondence. And then, a detour. His office. She told herself she was looking for financial records. Anything that might help her case, prove the affair had been ongoing, demonstrate the pattern of deception. What she found was worse. In a locked drawer, the lock pathetically easy to pick, she'd learned more than she realized living in this world. She found a box. Inside the box, photographs. Not of her, of Valentina, of others. A history of betrayal stretching back years, carefully documented like trophies. Some predated their marriage. Some didn't. Alessia sat on the floor of her husband's office, 6 months pregnant, surrounded by photographic evidence of her own humiliation, and she felt something inside her finally, completely break. Not her spirit. Her mercy. She left exactly at 2 o'clock. Ricardo was still waiting in the foyer. He looked worse than he had 2 hours ago, if that was possible. His control was fraying. The cold, unreadable mask he showed the world was cracking around the edges. Alessia. Did you find everything you? I found your collection. The words stopped him cold. The photographs. In your office. Valentina and how many others? I lost count after the first dozen. Some of them dated, which was considerate of you. Some from before our wedding. Some from after. His face went gray. How long have you been lying to me, Ricardo? From the beginning? Did you ever intend to be faithful? Or was I always just the legitimate option while you kept your entertainment on the side? Alessia! Don't! She held up her hand. I don't want explanations. I don't want apologies. I want you to understand something very clearly. I am going to destroy you in court. Every photograph, every receipt, every hotel record. My attorneys will find it all. And when they do, paragraph 47 will give me exactly what I want. The prenup, full custody, generous child support, and the satisfaction of watching you lose the one thing you actually cared about controlling. She stepped closer, close enough to see the veins standing out on his neck, close enough to see the way his tattooed hands had curled into fists at his sides. You should have been more careful, Ricardo. You should have hidden your trophies better. Or better yet, you should have kept your promises. She walked past him toward the door. His hand shot out, not to grab her, but hovering near her arm, desperate without touching. Alessia, please. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But the baby, our daughter, don't cut me out of her life completely. I'll do anything. I'll give you anything. Just don't take her away from me entirely. Alessia paused at the threshold. For a moment, just a moment, she saw him as she'd seen him 3 years ago. The powerful man who'd looked at her across a crowded gallery like she was the only person in the room. The man who'd wooed her with patience and intensity. The man who'd whispered promises against her hair on their wedding night. The man who'd lied. You should have thought about that, she said softly, before you made another woman more important than your family. The door closed behind her. The weeks that followed were war. Legal war. Emotional war. A war of attrition and endurance that Alessia had never anticipated fighting but refused to lose. Ricardo's attorneys contested everything. The photographs, obtained illegally, they wanted them thrown out. The witnesses, employees who could be pressured, discredited, dismissed. The prenuptial agreement, subject to interpretation, they argued. The infidelity clause required proof of an ongoing affair, not a single incident. Alessia's legal team pushed back at every turn. Meanwhile, she established a new life. An apartment in a secure building downtown, not as grand as the estate but hers. A routine that prioritized her pregnancy, her health, her slowly rebuilding sense of self. Weekly appointments with an obstetrician who monitored the baby's development with reassuring efficiency. A therapist, too. That was harder to accept. The idea that she needed help processing what had happened. But the therapist didn't judge, didn't pity, simply listened as Alessia unpacked 3 years of marriage, 3 weeks of devastation, and the terrifying question of what came next. You keep describing yourself as naive, the therapist observed during their 3rd session. Foolish, blind, those are harsh words. They're accurate. Are they? You married a man you loved. You trusted him because he gave you reason to trust him. When you discovered his betrayal, you responded with remarkable clarity and strength. That doesn't sound naive to me. That sounds like someone who was deceived by an expert deceiver and chose not to remain deceived once the truth emerged. Alessia considered this. He made me feel special, like I was different from the darkness of his world. And were you different? I thought I was. I thought our relationship was separate from all of it. The crime, the violence, the power games. I thought we had something pure. That belief was human, normal. It doesn't make you foolish, it makes you someone who wanted to believe in love. The fault lies with the person who exploited that belief, not with you for having it. For some reason, that made her cry. At 7 months pregnant, Alessia attended her first social event since leaving Ricardo. A gallery opening, ironically, the same venue where they'd met 4 years ago. She went as a statement, a declaration that she would not hide, would not be ashamed, would not let his betrayal reduce her to a cautionary whisper in society's gossip circles. She wore emerald green, elegant but not ostentatious, her pregnant silhouette graceful beneath the flowing fabric. Her hair swept up, her makeup minimal, her grandmother's pearls at her throat. She looked, she knew, devastatingly composed. And she knew he would be there. He was. Ricardo stood across the gallery, surrounded by associates, every inch the powerful figure society expected him to be. His charcoal suit was impeccable, his dark hair perfectly styled, the tattoos on his neck and hands visible as always. Marks of power that had once thrilled her and now served as reminders of everything dangerous about the world he inhabited. Their eyes met across the room. Alessia didn't look away. Neither did he. For a long moment, the entire gallery seemed to fade, the other patrons, the artwork, the murmur of conversation, leaving only the two of them locked in silent combat. Then Alessia smiled. Not warm, not forgiving, triumphant. She turned to the distinguished gentleman beside her. Marco Vecchi, a business associate of her late grandfather, old enough to be her father but influential enough to make a statement, and laughed at something he said. She felt Ricardo's gaze burning into her back. Let him burn. The evening progressed with careful choreography. Alessia worked the room, reconnecting with acquaintances she'd neglected during her marriage, establishing herself as an independent presence rather than an extension of the Moretti name. People were curious, of course. The whispers followed her like perfume. Did you hear what happened? The mistress was apparently young enough to be his daughter. That she's being so brave. Don't you think? I heard she's destroying him in court. Alessia let them whisper, let them speculate, gave them nothing but poise and pleasant conversation. And then Marco Vecchi placed his hand on her back. It was innocent, avuncular, a gesture of support as he guided her toward the champagne service. But from across the room it wouldn't have looked innocent. Alessia felt the shift in atmosphere before she saw its source. Felt the temperature drop as Ricardo excused himself from his group and began moving toward her. She had approximately 30 seconds before her soon-to-be ex-husband made a scene. Marco, she said smoothly, would you excuse me? I believe I see someone I need to speak with. She moved away before Ricardo could reach them, gliding toward a cluster of women near the exhibit entrance. Safety in numbers. Witnesses everywhere. He stopped in the middle of the gallery watching her retreat. Even from 20 feet away, she could see the tension in his jaw, the coiled danger in his posture, the way his tattooed hands had curled at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from closing the distance. She looked back over her shoulder and held his gaze. Not yours anymore. The message was silent but clear. His eyes darkened with something that might have been fury, or grief, or obsession so intense it had become indistinguishable from all three. Alessia turned away and didn't look back again. She left the gallery early, pleading pregnancy fatigue. What she actually felt was triumph, cold, clear, exhilarating. She'd faced him, hadn't crumbled, hadn't raged, had shown him and everyone watching that Alessia Bellini was not a woman who would be diminished by betrayal. Her driver pulled the car around. She slid into the back seat, closed her eyes, and allowed herself a moment of exhausted satisfaction. That was quite a performance. Her eyes flew open. Ricardo sat in the shadows of the opposite seat. How did you? Your driver works for me. They all work for me, Cara. Every security firm in Milan is either mine or afraid of me. Did you think I wouldn't be able to find you whenever I wanted? Alessia's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice even. Get out of my car. It's technically my car. As is your apartment, your clothes, your jewelry, everything you've surrounded yourself with in your new independent life. It all traces back to Moretti money eventually. My grandfather's trust is being managed by a firm that does business with my family. They won't touch me, Alessia, and neither will you. Not really. Not permanently. He leaned forward, and in the dim light she could see the raw intensity in his face, the desperation beneath his controlled words. Drop the divorce. No. I'll give you anything. Space. Time. Separate bedrooms if that's what you need. But don't dissolve this marriage. Don't take my daughter away from me. You took yourself away from us the moment you chose infidelity. It was a mistake. It was a pattern. She spat the word. I found your photographs. Your collection. Years of betrayal carefully preserved like prizes. Did you look at them and feel proud? Did you compare us? Your wife and your conquests? And congratulate yourself on having it all. His jaw tightened. Those photographs were evidence of exactly who you are. And who you are is not someone I want raising my daughter. Our daughter. Biologically. But biology doesn't make a father. Presence makes a father. Commitment makes a father. Honoring promises makes a father. And you have failed at all three. He moved so fast she barely registered it. One moment across the car, the next beside her, his hand catching her wrist, his face inches from hers. I will not let you take her from me. The threat vibrated between them. Alessia didn't flinch. Then you shouldn't have given me grounds, she said quietly. Let go of my wrist, Ricardo. I'm still pregnant with your child. Do you really want to add assault to your list of sins? For a moment, a terrifying, endless moment, she saw the violence in him, the capacity for cruelty that had made him king of an underworld empire, the darkness that she'd always known existed but had turned toward her. Then something shifted. His grip loosened, his breath shuddered out, and in his eyes, she saw something she'd never seen before. Fear. Not of her. For her. For them. For everything he was losing and couldn't figure out how to stop losing. I don't know how to fix this, he said, and his voice cracked on the admission. I don't know how to make you see. There's nothing to see. There's nothing to fix. You made choices, and choices have consequences. Even for men like you. Alessia, get out of my car. She pulled her wrist free. Don't contact me again except through our attorneys. Don't have your people follow me. Don't corner me in dark vehicles like some villain from a bad movie. If you have any respect left for what we once were, leave me alone. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he opened the car door and stepped out into the night. Alessia watched him standing on the curb, tall and broken and dangerous, until the driver pulled away and the shadows swallowed him entirely. She didn't sleep that night. The encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Not his threats, she'd expected those. Not his desperation, she'd seen that coming too. It was the crack in his voice. I don't know how to fix this. For 3 years, she'd believed Riccardo Moretti could fix anything, could control anything, could bend the world to his will through sheer force of presence. He was a man who solved problems with money and violence and cold strategic brilliance. And now he was admitting he couldn't solve this. Part of her, a small, traitorous part she immediately suppressed, wanted to comfort him, wanted to smooth the pain from his face, run her fingers through his hair, tell him everything would be all right. But everything would not be all right. Not anymore. She placed her hand on her belly, felt her daughter kick in response, and reminded herself why she was doing this. Not for revenge. Not for satisfaction. For her child. For the woman she refused to let her daughter become. The kind who accepted betrayal as normal, who measured her worth by a man's attention, who sacrificed her dignity on the altar of romantic delusion. Alessia would build a different life. A better example. A legacy of strength rather than surrender. And if that meant destroying the man she'd once loved, so be it. 8 months pregnant now. The divorce proceedings were escalating. Depositions, document requests, motions and countermotions flying between legal teams like artillery fire. Alessia had moved apartments again, somewhere Ricardo's drivers couldn't find, protected by a security firm with no Moretti connections. It cost a fortune, draining her grandfather's trust faster than she'd anticipated. But the peace of mind was worth it. She'd also learned things. Things about her husband's empire she'd never wanted to know. Things her attorneys had uncovered during discovery and presented to her with careful professional detachment. The smuggling operations, the protection rackets, the rival who had disappeared 3 years ago, right around the time of their wedding, whose body had never been found. You were married to a monster, her attorney said bluntly. I'm not sure you fully understood that before. I understood. I just didn't want to look too closely. And now she dreamed of blood, of bodies, of the cold efficiency in Ricardo's eyes when he discussed handling problems. Now she wondered if the hands that had touched her, held her, made her feel safe. Had those same hands ended lives? Of course they had. She'd always known, had chosen not to know, had performed the elaborate self-deception necessary to love a man whose power was built on violence. That woman was gone now. The woman who remained saw everything clearly, and clarity was devastating. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, hand-delivered to her attorney's office, addressed to her, written in Ricardo's own hand. The handwriting was elegant, surprising for a man of his reputation. Each letter formed with careful precision. Alessia, I'm not going to apologize again. You've made clear that apologies are worthless to you, and perhaps you're right. Words can't undo actions. Regret can't rebuild trust. I could write 100 letters explaining my failures, and none of them would change what you saw that night. But I need you to understand something, even if you never forgive me for it. I married you because you made me feel human. The world I live in, the world I was born into, is cold, transactional. Every relationship is leverage, every kindness a calculation, every loyalty purchased rather than earned. I learned early that love was weakness, that attachment was vulnerability, that trusting anyone completely was the fastest path to a grave. And then I met you. You looked at me like I was a person, not a title, not a threat, not a resource to be exploited. You saw something in me that I'd stopped believing existed, something decent, something capable of more than violence and strategy and cold ambition. I loved you for that. I still love you for that. But love and habit are different things. And the habits of a lifetime, the compartmentalization, the separation of worlds, the belief that what happened in darkness didn't touch the light. I couldn't break them. I tried. Some days I even succeeded. Other days I was exactly the monster you now believe me to be. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm only asking you to understand that my betrayal wasn't a statement about your worth. It was a statement about my own damage, my own brokenness, my own inability to be the man you deserved. You deserve better. Our daughter deserves better. I just wish I could have been better. Ricardo. Alessia read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in her desk drawer, and went to her prenatal appointment like her heart wasn't hemorrhaging in her chest. Labor came 3 weeks early. One moment she was fine, uncomfortable, exhausted, ready for pregnancy to end. And the next, her water broke in the middle of her living room and suddenly everything was motion and urgency. The hospital, the doctors, the blinding lights and the crushing waves of contractions and the overwhelming terror of realizing this was actually happening. Her mother came, her best friend from university, a constellation of support surrounding her during the longest 12 hours of her life. But in the moments between contractions, in the spaces where pain released its grip just long enough for thought to creep in, she found herself thinking of him. Not the betrayer, not the liar, not the man who'd destroyed her trust. The man who should have been here. The man whose hand should have been holding hers. The man who would never see his daughter's first moments because of choices he'd made in darkness. And despite everything, despite the fury and the hurt and the cold determination to destroy him, Alessia felt something like grief. For what could have been. For what should have been. For the family that would never exist now. Juliana Moretti was born at 3:47 in the morning. 6 pounds, 8 ounces. A shock of dark hair. Her father's sharp features already evident in miniature. Alessia held her daughter for the first time and felt the world fundamentally restructure around this tiny, perfect, impossible creature. "Hello," she whispered. "Hello, my love. My brave, beautiful girl." Juliana blinked up at her mother with unfocused newborn eyes. Dark, like Ricardo's, and Alessia's heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. This was what mattered. This was everything. Everything else. The divorce, the legal battles, the wreckage of her marriage was noise. Background static. irrelevant compared to the weight of her daughter in her arms. "I will protect you," Alessia promised. "I will give you everything. I will be enough." She didn't realize she was crying until her mother gently wiped her tears with a tissue. "You need to rest. I can't stop looking at her." "I know, darling. I know." Ricardo found out within hours. Because of course he did. He had people everywhere. Contacts in every hospital, every government office, every institution that touched his world. The birth of his daughter, even if he'd been barred from the delivery room, even if his wife had specifically requested he not be notified, was not something he was going to miss. He showed up the next morning. Not demanding, not forcing his way in. Simply present. Standing in the hospital corridor outside her room, dressed in an immaculate dark suit, the tattoos on his neck and hands stark against his olive skin, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. Her mother saw him first. "He's here," she said tightly. "Do you want me to call security?" Alessia looked through the window of her room to where he stood, watched him watching her, saw the way his eyes dropped to the bundle in her arms, the way his entire body seemed to strain toward the daughter he hadn't yet met. "No," she heard herself say. "Let him in. 5 minutes. Alessia. 5 minutes. With witnesses. He deserves to see her once." Her mother's expression made clear what she thought of that decision, but she stepped aside. Ricardo entered slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might startle them. His wife and the daughter he'd nearly lost the right to know. Alessia. Her name was rough in his throat. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. This isn't forgiveness. This is... I don't know what this is." She looked down at Juliana. "She should meet her father. Once. Once. That's all I'm offering." He crossed the room in 3 careful strides and stopped beside her bed. Up close, he looked worse than she'd ever seen him. Pale beneath his olive complexion, shadows carving hollows under his eyes, a tremor in the hands that had always been so steady. His hands that reached now toward his daughter. "May I?" Alessia hesitated. Every protective instinct screamed no. Don't give her to him. Don't let him hold what he doesn't deserve. But something else, something quieter, understood that this moment mattered. For Juliana. For the father-daughter relationship that would exist regardless of what happened between the adults. She transferred the baby into his arms. Ricardo held his daughter like she was made of spun glass, like she might shatter if he breathed wrong. His dark eyes, cold and unreadable to the rest of the world, were suddenly startlingly soft. "Juliana," he whispered. "My Juliana. It was my grandmother's name. I know. I remember." He didn't look up from the baby's face. "She's perfect. Yes. She has your nose. And your eyes. God help her." It might have been a joke. Might have been genuine despair. Alessia couldn't tell anymore. They stood in silence. The 3 of them, this fractured almost family. While machines beeped and hospital sounds filtered through the walls and the weight of everything unsaid pressed down like atmosphere. Finally, Ricardo spoke. "I'll sign whatever you want." Alessia blinked. "What?" "The divorce. The custody agreement. Whatever terms you're asking for, I'll agree. Full custody. Supervised visitation only. Whatever protects you and Juliana from what I am." "Why?" He looked at her then, and she saw it, the absolute destruction behind his eyes. The man who controlled an empire, brought to his knees by a 6-pound baby, and the woman who had finally, irrevocably stopped loving him. "Because you were right. About everything." His voice cracked. "I had everything that mattered, and I threw it away for nothing. For habit. For the kind of man I thought I had to be. And now I'm going to spend the rest of my life knowing that my daughter will grow up believing her father is a monster. And the worst part is, she won't be wrong." He pressed a kiss to Juliana's forehead. Gentle, reverent, goodbye, and transferred her back into Alessia's arms. "I won't fight you anymore. I won't make this harder than it has to be. Just let me see her sometimes, even if it's supervised, even if you're there the entire time." "I can't." His voice broke completely. Alessia watched Riccardo Moretti, the most powerful, most feared man in Milan, press his hand over his eyes and struggle not to cry in front of her. And something shifted. Not forgiveness. She wasn't sure forgiveness was possible, not yet, maybe not ever. But something. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. He nodded once, sharply, not trusting his voice. Then he walked out of the room and didn't look back. The next weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and feeding schedules and the overwhelming, terrifying, transcendent experience of new motherhood. Alessia's mother stayed for the first 2 weeks, then returned to her own life with promises to visit constantly. Friends rotated through, bringing meals, offering to hold the baby while Alessia showered, providing the village that new mothers desperately needed. And through it all, the legal machinery ground forward. True to his word, Riccardo signed everything. Full custody to Alessia, generous child support, more than generous, enough to ensure Juliana wanted for nothing until she was 90. Supervised visitation twice monthly, at a location of Alessia's choosing, with Alessia present for every moment. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday in October. Alessia read the paperwork confirming the end of her marriage, looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully in the nursery, and felt empty. Not triumphant, not relieved, just empty. Life settled into patterns. Juliana at 1 month, 2 months, 3. She was an easy baby. A small mercy that Alessia thanked the universe for daily. Sleeping well, eating well, smiling at her mother with the gummy, radiant joy that only infants can produce. She looked more like Riccardo every day. The eyes, the sharp little chin, the way her brow furrowed when she was concentrating on something. Exactly the expression her father made when reviewing business documents. Alessia tried not to dwell on it. The supervised visits happened as scheduled. Riccardo arrived punctually, left punctually, and spent every allocated minute focused entirely on his daughter. He didn't try to engage Alessia in conversation, didn't push boundaries, didn't do anything that could be perceived as violating the terms of their agreement. He was improbably a good father during those visits, patient, attentive, gentle in a way that seemed impossible for a man of his reputation. He changed diapers without complaint, held Juliana for hours while she slept, sang to her, actually sang in a surprisingly pleasant baritone, Italian lullabies that Alessia recognized from her own childhood. She watched these visits from across the room and felt confused. This was not the man who had betrayed her. This was not the cold strategist or the calculating mob boss or the serial cheater who'd kept photographs of his conquests. This was someone else entirely. Or maybe it was all the same person, and she'd never understood how the contradictions fit together. For months after the divorce, something changed. Alessia was home with Juliana. A quiet evening, the baby fed and sleeping, a glass of wine and a book her only companions, when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone. Through the security screen, she saw a face she didn't recognize. A young man, nervous, holding an envelope. "Mrs. Moretti? Bellini. Sorry, Ms. Bellini. I'm supposed to deliver this. This from... It's important. About Mr. Moretti." Alarm bells rang. She kept the chain on the door as she accepted the envelope, then watched until the messenger left before opening it. Inside, a single photograph. Valentina Rossi, the mistress, the woman from the bedroom, standing in what appeared to be a hospital corridor. And behind her, barely visible but unmistakable, Riccardo, his tattooed hand on her arm, their heads bent together in conversation. The photograph was dated 3 days ago. Alessia stared at it until her vision blurred. Then she called her attorney. "We need to discuss what this means. It means he lied. He's still seeing her. He never stopped. Possibly. Or this could be manipulation. Someone trying to provoke you." "Who?" Her attorney hesitated. "Mr. Moretti has enemies. People who would benefit from destabilizing his personal life further. This photograph could be genuine, or it could be fabricated. We need more information before drawing conclusions. And if it's genuine, then we revisit the custody arrangement. His supervised visitation could be revoked entirely." Alessia should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt tired. So tired. She didn't tell Ricardo about the photograph immediately. Instead, she watched. The next supervised visit, she studied him for signs of deception, the tells she'd learned to recognize over 3 years of marriage. The slight tension in his jaw when he was hiding something. The way his gaze flickered left when he was constructing a lie. He seemed the same, focused on Juliana, present in a way he'd rarely been during their marriage, almost desperately devoted to these precious hours with his daughter. But then again, he'd seemed devoted to her too, and she'd been wrong about everything. A week later, she confronted him. Not during a visit, that would have been too disruptive, too focused on the wrong things, but afterward, when Juliana was safely with the nanny and they were alone in the hallway outside her apartment. "I need to ask you something." He stopped, surprised. This was the first time she'd initiated conversation in months. "Of course." She pulled out the photograph, watched his face as he looked at it. His expression went through several stages. Confusion, recognition, then something dark and dangerous that reminded her exactly who she was dealing with. "Where did you get this?" "It was delivered to me, anonymously. And you believe it's real? Is it?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Yes and no." "Explain." "The image is real. I was at that hospital. Valentina was there. But the context is being deliberately misrepresented." "Enlighten me." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she recognized from their marriage. "Valentina has cancer, ovarian. She came to me because she has no family, no insurance that will cover experimental treatment, and no one else to turn to. I was at the hospital arranging payment for her care." Alessia stared at him. "You expect me to believe that? I expect you to verify it. Call the hospital. Ask them about her treatment. Ask them who's paying for it." His eyes met hers. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I know I've destroyed any right to your trust. But I am asking you to check the facts before assuming the worst. Why would you help her? After everything?" "Because she's dying." His voice was flat. "Because whatever she did, whatever I did, she doesn't deserve to die alone in pain because she can't afford treatment. And because—" He paused, something shifting in his expression. "Because I'm trying to be different, to do better, even when no one's watching." Alessia searched his face for the lie. She couldn't find it. "I'll verify," she said finally. "And if you're lying, if I'm lying, you can take away my visitation entirely. I'll sign whatever documents you need." "Why would you offer that?" "Because I'm not lying." He stepped back. "Check the facts. Then decide what you believe." He turned and walked away. Alessia stood in the hallway for a long time, the photograph crumpled in her hand, wondering when everything had become so complicated. She verified. The hospital confirmed. Valentina Rossi was a patient receiving treatment for stage 3 ovarian cancer. The bills were being paid by an anonymous benefactor through a medical trust. Proved nothing or everything depending on how she chose to interpret it. He could still be lying about the nature of their relationship. Could still be sleeping with his mistress even while paying for her cancer treatment. Or he could be telling the truth. A man trying to do one decent thing in a lifetime of indecent choices. Alessia didn't know what to believe anymore. The next supervised visit, she watched him differently. Not searching for lies this time. Searching for— she wasn't sure. Understanding, maybe. Some key to the paradox that was Riccardo Moretti. He held Juliana with such tenderness. Spoke to her in a soft voice that bore no resemblance to the commanding tone he used with everyone else. When the baby fussed, he walked her around the room with patient determination until she settled. This was real. Whatever else was performance, whatever masks he wore for the world, this love for his daughter was genuine. Alessia found herself wondering, for the first time since the betrayal, whether love could exist alongside failure. Whether a person could be genuinely devoted and genuinely broken at the same time. Whether she had been too quick to reduce him to a villain. Juliana's first Christmas was quiet. Alessia's mother came, a few close friends. A small tree, simple presents. the soft chaos of an infant who didn't understand the holiday but seemed delighted by the lights. Ricardo wasn't there, of course. The custody arrangement didn't include holidays. Alessia had specifically excluded them during negotiations. But that evening a package arrived. No return address, just her name in familiar handwriting. Inside, a first edition of her favorite book, a collection of Italian poetry she'd mentioned loving during one of their early conversations. Years ago, she'd never been able to find a copy. A note was tucked inside the cover. I remember everything you told me, every conversation, every preference, every dream. I just forgot to act like it mattered. Buon Natale. Alessia held the book for a long time, running her fingers over the cracked spine, and tried to understand what she was feeling. It wasn't love. She was certain, mostly certain, that it wasn't love anymore. But it wasn't hatred either. Something in between. Something complicated and painful and impossible to name. The new year brought changes. Small ones at first. Alessia finding herself less tense during supervised visits. Ricardo's updates about his life, offered carefully, without presumption, becoming almost normal conversation. He was reorganizing his business, he told her. Stepping back from the more violent aspects. Delegating to trusted lieutenants. Trying to build something that Juliana might someday not be ashamed of. Why tell me this? She asked. Because I want you to know. He shrugged. Because hoping you might see me as something other than a monster is probably foolish. But I'm not ready to stop hoping. She didn't respond to that. But she found herself thinking about it later. Then came the threat. Alessia was picking Juliana up from the nanny when her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. Mrs. Moretti. The voice was male, accented, cold. We have a message for your husband. Ex-husband. The distinction is irrelevant to us. You have something he values. Your daughter. Your safety. Tell him that Victor Antonov sends his regards, and that the debts of fathers are inherited by daughters. The line went dead. Alessia's blood turned to ice. She called Ricardo. Not her attorney. Not the police. Ricardo. Because whatever else had happened between them, whatever wreckage their marriage had become, he was still the man best equipped to handle threats from his world. He answered on the first ring. Alessia? Someone called me. A man. He mentioned Victor Antonov. He talked about Juliana. Silence. Then, in a voice she'd never heard from him, flat, dangerous, utterly devoid of humanity. Where are you? At the nanny's. About to leave. Don't. Stay exactly where you are. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in except me. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He hung up before she could respond. 12 minutes later, Ricardo's car screeched to a stop outside the nanny's building. He wasn't alone. 2 other vehicles followed, men Alessia recognized from her married life, soldiers in the Moretti organization, armed and alert. Ricardo swept through the door like a force of nature, his gaze finding her immediately, then dropping to Juliana in her carrier. Are you hurt? No. We're fine. The caller. Did he say anything else? Any specifics? Alessia recounted the conversation word for word, watched Ricardo's face grow harder with each phrase. Victor Antonov, he said when she finished. Russian organization. We had dealings years ago that ended badly. He's been making moves against my territory for months. This is him escalating. By threatening your daughter? By threatening everything I care about. His eyes met hers. You and Juliana need to come with me. Tonight, I have a safe house, a place even Antonov can't touch. You'll stay there until this is resolved. I'm not going anywhere with you. Alessia, we're divorced. Whatever danger exists in your world, I specifically structured our custody arrangement to protect Juliana from it. You assured me she would be safe. I was wrong. The admission cost him. She could see it in the tightening of his jaw. I underestimated how far Antonov would go. But the threat is real, and right now, the only way I can protect you is if you're somewhere I can control. Control. She laughed bitterly. That's always what it comes back to, isn't it? This isn't about control. This is about survival. He stepped closer, and she saw the fear beneath his anger. Genuine terror for his daughter's safety. Please, Alessia. I know you hate me. I know you have every reason to never trust me again. But our daughter's life is at stake. Let me protect her. Let me protect you. Juliana chose that moment to cry. A sharp, startled wail that cut through the tension like a blade. Alessia gathered her daughter against her chest, felt the tiny heart racing, and made a decision. 24 hours, she said. Then we discuss alternatives. Ricardo's exhale was pure relief. Thank you. The safe house was not what she expected. A villa in the hills outside Milan, elegant but fortress-like, surrounded by security that made her former apartment system look like a toy. Ricardo gave her and Juliana a suite on the second floor. Luxurious rooms, a nursery already prepared, every comfort anticipated. Then he left them alone. Hours passed. Alessia paced, fed the baby, watched the security feeds on the monitor he'd shown her how to use. She saw Ricardo on multiple screens, coordinating with his men, making phone calls, planning whatever response he deemed necessary. He didn't sleep, didn't eat that she could tell, just worked relentlessly to eliminate the threat to his family. 3 a.m, she found him in the kitchen. He sat at the counter, his suit jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, exposing the full extent of his forearm tattoos. A glass of whiskey sat untouched beside him. He looked up when she entered. Is Juliana all right? Sleeping. Finally. She hesitated in the doorway. What are you doing? Waiting for information. My people are tracking Antonov's movements. Once we know where he is, we can. He stopped. You don't want to know the details. No, she didn't. But she also couldn't sleep, couldn't stop her mind from racing through worst-case scenarios, couldn't shake the terror of that phone call. She crossed to the counter and sat on the stool beside him. He looked at her with something approaching wonder. What? She asked. You're sitting next to me. Voluntarily. Don't read into it. I wouldn't dare. They sat in silence for a while. Alessia found the quiet oddly comfortable. More comfortable than she would have expected, given everything. Why did you agree to come? He asked eventually. You had every reason to refuse. To call the police, contact your attorney, handle this through official channels. Would official channels work against Viktor Antonov? No. Then there's your answer. She studied her hands. You're many things, Ricardo. Not all of them good. But incompetent isn't one of them. If there's a threat to Juliana, you're the best person to eliminate it. Even though you hate me. I don't hate you. The admission surprised her as much as it seemed to surprise him. I thought I did. For a while I wanted to. But hatred requires energy I don't have anymore. Mostly I just feel tired, sad, disappointed. Which is worse than hatred. Maybe. He reached for his whiskey finally and took a long swallow. I loved you, you know. I know it doesn't matter now. I know saying it changes nothing. But I need you to understand that whatever I did wrong, my feelings for you were real. You weren't a convenience or a cover story. You were the only person in my life who made me feel like I could be different. Better. So why weren't you? He was quiet for a long moment. Because being better is hard. And I'm a coward. Alessia looked at the man beside her. Powerful, feared, broken in ways she was only beginning to understand, and felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, but perhaps the first step toward it. The threat was eliminated 3 days later. Alessia didn't ask for details. Didn't want to know what Ricardo and his people had done to ensure Viktor Antonov would never threaten anyone again. Some knowledge was too heavy to carry. She only knew that on the morning of the 4th day, Ricardo came to her suite with dark circles under his eyes and a look of exhausted relief. It's done, he said. You're safe. Both of you. You're certain? Yes. She nodded slowly. Then we can discuss what comes next. What do you want to happen next? The question hung between them. Alessia looked at this man, her ex-husband, her daughter's father, the complicated tangle of monster and protector he represented, and tried to articulate an answer. I want Juliana to be safe. She will be. I'll make sure of it. I want her to have a relationship with her father. A real one. Not supervised visits in neutral locations. Something flickered in his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying. She paused, gathering courage. I'm saying that the man who just spent 3 days without sleep protecting his daughter deserves more than 2 hours a month. I'm saying that maybe I was so focused on punishing you for the past that I wasn't thinking clearly about the future. Alessia, I'm not saying I forgive you. I'm not saying I'm ready to be in the same room as you without wanting to scream. But I am saying that Juliana needs her father, and I've seen now that you're capable of being a good one. Ricardo looked at her like she'd offered him the world. What do you need from me? Honesty. Complete transparency about any threats, any dangers, anything that might affect our daughter's safety. If you ever lie to me again about anything, I'll take her so far away you'll never find us. I understand. And I need time to figure out what I want. What kind of relationship we're going to have going forward. Can you give me that? I'll give you anything. She believed him. For the first time in months, she actually believed him. They stayed at the safe house for another week. Not because of danger, but because Alessia was too exhausted to face the logistics of returning to normal life. During that week, something shifted between them. Not romance, not reconciliation, but a tentative peace. A ceasefire in the war they'd been waging since that devastating night. They ate meals together, traded off nighttime feedings, had conversations that didn't involve attorneys or custody agreements. She learned that he was serious about restructuring his business, that he'd been in therapy, something she would have sworn impossible for a man of his pride, that he was reading parenting books, plural, with the focused intensity he usually reserved for business strategy. You're different, she said one evening, watching him read to Juliana from a picture book. I'm trying to be. Why now? He looked up from the book, his dark eyes meeting hers. Because I lost you. Because that night in the bedroom, watching you walk away without even crying, I saw exactly who I'd become. And I couldn't stand him. The other women haven't been any others. Not since you left. Not since I realized what I'd actually thrown away. Valentina is just someone I'm helping. Nothing more. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to watch, over time, and decide for yourself whether I'm telling the truth. It was, she realized, the only answer that could have worked. Not defensive insistence. Not wounded protestations. Just an invitation to verify. To let his actions speak for themselves. When Alessia finally returned to her apartment, she felt different. Not healed. The wound Ricardo had inflicted was too deep to heal completely. Might never fully heal. But the bleeding had stopped. Life resumed. Work. She'd started a small consulting business, using skills from her pre-marriage career. Juliana's development. Each new milestone a source of joy. The slow rebuilding of an identity that didn't depend on being anyone's wife. And gradually, carefully, a new kind of relationship with Ricardo. He came for visits at her apartment now. Spent hours with Juliana while Alessia worked in the next room. Never pushed for more than she offered. Never violated the boundaries she established. He was, she had to admit, trying. Genuinely, consistently, frustratingly trying. It was a Thursday evening, Juliana at 8 months, mastering the art of almost crawling, when Ricardo asked if they could talk. About what? About us. About whether there might be anything to rebuild. Alessia set down the toy she'd been holding and met his gaze. You understand that trust, once broken, takes years to repair? Yes. You understand that even if I wanted to try, which I'm not saying I do, it would be slow, painful, without guarantees. Yes. Why would you sign up for that? You could find someone new, someone without the baggage, someone who looks at you without seeing betrayal. He was quiet for a moment. Then, because I don't want someone new. I want the woman I fell in love with. The woman who saw the best in me even when I didn't deserve it. The woman who built a family with me, then had the strength to walk away when I failed her. I'm not that woman anymore. No. You're stronger. More complete. You don't need me, you've made that abundantly clear. But I'm asking whether you might someday want me anyway. Not because you have to, because you choose to. Alessia looked at him. This man who had broken her heart and then spent months trying to become worthy of the pieces. I don't know, she said honestly. I genuinely don't know. Then let me keep showing you. Let me keep trying. And if you decide you can never love me again, I'll accept it. I'll be the best co-parent I know how to be, and I'll never ask for more. And if I decide I can? His eyes lit with something that looked like hope. Fragile, desperate, barely controlled. Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret it. It wasn't a promise of happy endings. Wasn't a guarantee that love could conquer betrayal, pride, and all the damage between them. But it was a start. And starts, Alessia was learning, were sometimes enough. The months that followed existed in a strange suspended state. Neither reconciliation nor continued warfare, but something delicate and undefined that Alessia didn't have words for. Ricardo continued his visits. Continued being present, patient, attentive in ways that the man she'd married had never quite managed. He showed up when he said he would. Left when she asked him to. Respected every boundary without testing them. It was, she realized one evening while watching him help Juliana practice standing, deeply unsettling. Not because she doubted his sincerity. She'd watched too closely for too long to miss signs of performance. But because sincerity from Ricardo Moretti was something she'd stopped believing possible. And having that belief challenged required restructuring her understanding of everything. You're staring, he said without looking up. I'm observing. Same thing. He guided Juliana's tiny hands to grip the coffee table's edge, steadying her with infinite patience. What conclusion have you reached? That you're either genuinely changed or the most committed liar I've ever encountered. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Excuse me? Now he did look up. His dark eyes finding hers with an intensity that still made something in her chest tighten despite everything. I am genuinely changed. I'm also an excellent liar. Both things are true. The question isn't whether I'm capable of deception. You already know I am. The question is whether I'm choosing honesty with you now. And are you? Yes. Simple. Certain. But I understand why you can't just believe that. Why you need to verify. Why every interaction with me requires you to search for the angle, the manipulation, the hidden agenda. It's exhausting. I know. And I'm sorry. Not just for the betrayal itself, but for the work you have to do now, the constant vigilance. That's my fault too. Juliana chose that moment to release the table and take 2 wobbly steps before collapsing onto her padded bottom. She looked up at her parents with an expression of pure astonishment. Did she just... Alessia started. Her first steps. Ricardo's voice cracked slightly. She took her first steps. They both moved at the same time, reaching for their daughter, their hands brushing as they celebrated her achievement. The touch was brief, accidental, but it sent electricity through Alessia's skin. She pulled back quickly. Too quickly. Ricardo noticed. Of course he noticed. But he said nothing, just focused on Juliana, praising her accomplishment with the enthusiasm of a father witnessing a miracle. And it was a miracle, Alessia thought. This tiny person they'd created together, growing and changing and achieving new things every day. This common ground that existed between them regardless of divorce papers or broken trust. Their daughter, their one unambiguous success. That night, after Ricardo had gone and Juliana was sleeping, Alessia sat alone with a glass of wine and tried to untangle her feelings. The brush of his hand against hers kept replaying in her mind. Such a small thing. Such an insignificant moment. But her body's reaction had been immediate and involuntary. A reminder that physical awareness didn't disappear just because emotional trust had been shattered. She still found him attractive. Still responded to his presence with a quickening pulse and heightened awareness. Still remembered, in vivid detail, what it had felt like to be loved by him. To be touched by him. To fall asleep beside him believing they had forever. Those memories were traitors now. They whispered that maybe things could be different. Maybe people could change. Maybe the man showing up day after day with patient devotion was the real Ricardo, and the man who had betrayed her was the aberration. But she'd believed in maybes before, and maybes had led her to that bedroom doorway, her hand on her pregnant belly, her entire world collapsing in the space between heartbeats. She finished her wine and went to bed alone. Juliana's first birthday arrived with all the fanfare a one-year-old couldn't possibly appreciate. Alessia planned a small party, family, close friends, the carefully curated guest list of someone rebuilding a social life from scratch. Ricardo asked if he could attend, and after considerable internal debate, she agreed. 2 hours, she specified. You can help set up, stay for the party, leave after cake. Whatever you're comfortable with. He arrived early, dressed down from his usual immaculate suits. Dark jeans, a simple button-down with the sleeves rolled to expose his forearm tattoos, looking more human and less mafia boss than she'd seen him in years. He'd brought balloons, an almost comical number of them, pink and silver and white, filling the back seat of his car like a ridiculous cloud. You do realize she won't remember any of this, Alessia said as they tied balloons to various surfaces. I'll remember. He secured a cluster to the high chair. And you'll have photos. Someday she'll look at them and see that her father was here for her first birthday. That matters. It does. She hadn't meant to agree so readily, but the words escaped before she could filter them. He looked at her with something approaching hope. Does it? I want her to have a relationship with you. A real one. I've told you that. You've told me what you want for Juliana. You haven't told me what you want for yourself. The question hung in the air, balloon ribbons drifting between them like streamers at a celebration neither of them fully understood. I don't know what I want for myself, she admitted. I thought I did. Divorce, independence, a clean break from everything associated with the Moretti name. But you keep showing up. You keep being different. And I don't know how to process that. I don't know how to hold the man who destroyed me and the man who reads parenting books in my head at the same time. They're the same person. He set down the balloon he'd been tying. That's what I've been trying to show you. Not that I wasn't the man who hurt you. I did. Those choices were mine and I own them. But I'm also the man who wants to be better. Who's working to be better. Both versions exist simultaneously. That's terrifying. I know. Because if you can contain both versions, how do I ever trust that the better version will win? How do I know that in 5 years, 10 years, you won't revert to patterns that feel more natural? You don't. His honesty was brutal. You can't. There's no guarantee I can offer that would mean anything, because I've already proven that my guarantees are worthless. The only thing I can do is keep showing up, keep choosing differently, and hope that eventually, the weight of evidence becomes enough. That could take years. I have years. His eyes held hers. I have however long it takes. And if it never becomes enough, if you decide you can't trust me again, I'll accept that. But I won't stop trying. I won't stop showing you who I'm working to become. Guests began arriving before she could respond. Maybe that was for the best. Some conversations needed time to breathe. The party was a success by any reasonable measure. Juliana was passed between adoring relatives, stuffed with cake she mostly wore rather than ate, and showered with presents she'd immediately lost interest in. She giggled. She clapped. She tried to walk and toppled repeatedly to everyone's delighted concern. Ricardo stayed in the background mostly, present but not dominating, interacting warmly with guests who eyed him with varying degrees of suspicion. Alessia's mother was coolly polite, her college friend openly hostile. But he absorbed their skepticism without defensiveness, accepting that earning trust from people who cared about her would be as difficult as earning it from her directly. When the party wound down and guests began leaving, Ricardo helped clean up without being asked. You don't have to do that. I know. He gathered wrapping paper into a bag. But Juliana's exhausted, and you've been on your feet for 6 hours. Let me help. She was too tired to argue. They cleaned in companionable silence, moving around each other with the ease of people who had once shared a home. Occasionally their paths crossed, reaching for the same discarded plate, navigating past each other in the narrow kitchen, and each near contact sent awareness prickling along Alessia's skin. By the time the apartment was restored to order, Juliana was asleep in her nursery, and the early evening had faded to night. "I should go," Ricardo said, though he made no move toward the door. "You should." Neither of them moved. "Alessia, don't." She held up her hand. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. I can't handle any more emotional revelations tonight. I'm exhausted. I was just going to say thank you for including me today, for letting me be part of her birthday." "Oh," she deflated slightly. "You're welcome. And that I love you. You said you weren't going to." "I know. I'm sorry. But I can't be in the same room as you, watching you be an incredible mother to our daughter, and not tell you that I love you. It's not possible for me." "Ricardo, I'm not asking for anything." He stepped toward the door. "I'm not expecting anything. I just need you to know that whatever happens, however this ends, I love you. I've never stopped loving you. I was just too broken to show it properly." He left before she could respond. Alessia sank onto her couch, surrounded by the lingering evidence of celebration, and let herself feel everything she'd been suppressing all day. The confusion, the longing, the terrifying possibility that she might be falling in love with him again. Weeks passed. Alessia threw herself into work, a major consulting project that demanded long hours and gave her an excuse to limit Ricardo's visits. Professional necessity, she told herself. Nothing to do with avoiding the complicated feelings their last conversation had stirred. He didn't push. Of course he didn't. He sent texts, brief, practical, focused on Juliana. He showed up for scheduled visits and left exactly on time. He gave her exactly the space she'd silently demanded. And somehow that made everything worse, because his respect for her boundaries felt like evidence of change, like proof that he was capable of prioritizing her needs over his wants, like confirmation that the man he was becoming might actually be trustworthy. She didn't want confirmation. She wanted to stay angry, stay guarded, stay protected by the armor of her justified resentment. But armor was heavy, and she was so tired of carrying it. The call came on a Wednesday morning. Ricardo's voice was strange, strained in a way she'd never heard from him. "I need you to come to the hospital. It's not Juliana. She's fine. But I need you here. Please." "What happened?" "Just come. I'll explain when you get here." The drive to the hospital was 20 minutes of pure anxiety. Her mind cycled through possibilities, his health, an attack from enemies, something involving the business she'd deliberately stopped asking about. She found him in the cardiac ward, sitting in a sterile hallway, his face gray, his tattooed hands clasped between his knees like a man praying. "Ricardo." He looked up, and she saw something she'd never seen from him before. Tears. "My father," he said. "He's dying." Domenico Moretti. Alessia had met him exactly twice during her marriage. A cold, imperious man who'd looked at her like a disappointing business acquisition. He'd opposed Ricardo's choice to marry for love rather than alliance, had spent their entire relationship making his disapproval clear. She'd never understood why Ricardo craved his approval so desperately. But watching her ex-husband crumble in a hospital corridor, she began to understand that some wounds formed in childhood and never fully healed. "He had a heart attack yesterday," Ricardo explained. "They tried to intervene, but the damage was too extensive. He's refusing further treatment. Says he's lived long enough." "I'm sorry. He asked to see you." That stopped her. "Me? Why?" "I don't know. He specifically requested you. Said there was something he needed to say." Every instinct screamed no. Domenico Moretti had never been anything but cruel to her. Subtle cruelty, the kind masked by impeccable manners, but cruelty nonetheless. Why would she subject herself to whatever dying message he wanted to deliver? But Ricardo looked at her with eyes full of grief and exhaustion and something that might have been desperation, and she found herself nodding. "Okay, I'll see him." The hospital room was private, expensive, filled with the quiet hum of machines keeping a powerful man alive long enough to say goodbye. Domenico Moretti looked smaller than she remembered. The illness had stripped away the imposing presence, leaving behind a frail old man whose hands trembled against white sheets. but his eyes were still sharp. Alessia. Her name was a rasp. You came. Your son asked me to. Always honest. A ghost of a smile. That's why I wanted to see you. Sit. She sat, maintaining distance, keeping her expression carefully neutral. I'm dying. So I've been told. The doctors give me days. Maybe a week if I'm stubborn about it. He shifted slightly, wincing. There are things I need to say before that happens. Things that have haunted me. Mr. Moretti. Let me speak. The command was weak but still present. I never approved of you. You know that. I thought Ricardo was foolish, marrying a woman with no useful family connections. No power to offer, nothing but... He paused, searching for words. Nothing but love. I thought love was weakness. I taught my son that it was weakness. I was wrong. Alessia said nothing. The way he destroyed his marriage, the other women, the lies, that's my fault. Not entirely, but substantially. I raised him to believe that family was about power, about legacy, about heirs. That wives were necessities but not partners. That pleasure was separate from commitment. He coughed, a rattling sound that seemed to shake his entire frame. I gave him permission to be exactly the man who broke your heart. Why are you telling me this? Because he's different now. And I need you to know it's not an act. How can you know that? Because he sat with me for 3 hours yesterday, telling me all the ways he's failed, all the ways he's trying to change, all the ways he hopes to become worthy of you again. Domenico's eyes found hers. My son has never confessed weakness to me, never admitted failure, never shown vulnerability. He built walls between us that I thought would never come down. But yesterday, for 3 hours, he let me see who he actually is. Alessia's throat tightened. He loves you, not the way I taught him to love, possessively, transactionally, but actually loves you, the kind of love that makes men want to be better than they are. He reached toward her, his trembling hand falling short. I'm asking you as a dying man who has no right to ask anything. Give him another chance. Not for my sake. For his. For your daughters. For the family you could still become if you let yourselves. It's not that simple. Nothing is simple. But love is rare. The kind of love he has for you. The kind that survives betrayal and transforms itself into genuine devotion. That's rarer still. Don't let my mistakes cost you a lifetime of happiness. He fell back against his pillows, exhausted by the effort of speaking. Alessia sat for a long moment, processing everything she'd heard. Then, quietly, thank you for telling me this. Thank you for listening. His eyes drifted closed. Send my son in. I'd like to see him before I rest. She found Ricardo in the hallway, exactly where she'd left him. He wants to see you. Ricardo rose, his movements stiff with tension. What did he say to you? That he's sorry. For a lot of things. She touched his arm. The first time she'd voluntarily touched him in over a year, and felt him tremble beneath her fingers. Go be with your father. I'll wait. You don't have to. I know. Go. He went. Alessia sank into the chair he'd vacated, her mind spinning with Domenico's confession. The idea that Ricardo's betrayal had roots in childhood conditioning didn't excuse it. Nothing could excuse it, but it did provide context. Explanation. A framework for understanding how a man who genuinely loved her could also have hurt her so devastatingly. People were shaped by their damage. Sometimes they stayed shaped. Sometimes they broke free. The question was whether Ricardo had actually broken free, or whether his transformation was temporary. A grief response, a crisis of conscience, something that would fade once circumstances changed. She didn't know. But for the first time since that night in the bedroom, she wanted to find out. Domenico Moretti died 4 days later. The funeral was an elaborate affair. Hundreds of attendees from worlds both legitimate and otherwise. A church filled with flowers and false mourning. The elaborate theater that powerful families staged when their patriarchs passed. Alessia attended. She told herself it was for Juliana. Their daughter should be represented at her grandfather's funeral, but the truth was more complicated. She went for Ricardo, because grief was heavy, and carrying it alone was harder. because she remembered how he'd been there for her during the difficult early months of her pregnancy, before everything fell apart. Because some part of her, despite everything, still cared what happened to him. She stood in the back of the church, Juliana in her arms, watching Ricardo deliver a eulogy that was honest about his complicated relationship with his father while still honoring the man's memory. He looked up once, finding her in the crowd, and his entire face changed. Not a smile, wrong occasion for smiling, but a softening, a release of tension, the simple acknowledgement that her presence mattered more than anyone else's in that enormous, flower-filled space. After the service, after the burial, after the endless reception where Ricardo shook hands and accepted condolences with mechanical precision, Alessia found him alone in a side garden. He was sitting on a stone bench, his dark suit somehow still immaculate despite the long day, his head bowed, his tattooed hands clasped between his knees. She sat beside him without speaking. Minutes passed. Finally, "Thank you for coming." "Of course." "It wasn't of course. You didn't owe me anything. You certainly didn't owe my father anything. But you came anyway. You're my daughter's father. You were there for me when I needed support. It seemed right to return the favor." He looked at her, his dark eyes red-rimmed but dry. "Is that all it is? Obligation?" "I don't know." The honesty felt dangerous but necessary. "I've been thinking a lot about what your father said to me, about what you've been showing me these past months, about what I want my life to look like going forward. And I'm tired, Ricardo. Tired of anger. Tired of vigilance. Tired of waiting for you to prove who you really are while simultaneously hoping you fail, so I can feel justified in keeping my walls up." That sounds exhausting. It is, but letting those walls down feels terrifying. Because if I let myself trust you again and you hurt me again, I won't. You can't promise that. I can promise to try, every day, for the rest of my life. He turned toward her, his intensity focused entirely on her face. "I know I destroyed your trust. I know words mean nothing after what I did. But I'm begging for the chance to rebuild. Slowly, carefully, however you need it to happen. Let me try. And if I can't, if I try to let you in again and find that I just can't, then at least we'll know. And I'll stop hoping for something that isn't possible, and you'll stop feeling guilty for not giving it to me." It was, she realized, the first time he'd offered her a real exit. Not conditional. Not manipulative. Just genuine acknowledgement that her inability to forgive would be acceptable, even if painful. "I need time. You can have all the time in the world. And boundaries. Clear ones. We move slow. Rebuild the friendship before we even consider anything else. Whatever you want. And if you ever lie to me again, about anything no matter how small, it's over permanently. I understand." She studied his face, searching for the deception she'd become so skilled at detecting. She found only sincerity. Terrifying, hopeful sincerity. "Okay," she heard herself say. "We try." Trying looked different than she'd expected. Not romantic dates or grand gestures. Nothing that could be mistaken for rushing toward reconciliation. Instead, weekly dinners as a family, the three of them together. Joint parenting decisions made through actual conversation rather than legal intermediaries. Slow, careful rebuilding of the friendship that had existed before romance complicated everything. Ricardo was patient. More patient than she would have believed possible. He listened when she needed to process old hurts. Accepted her anger when it surged unexpectedly. Gave her space when she pulled away, returned when she reached out. He answered every question she asked, about his business, his past, his other relationships, with brutal honesty. Yes, there were others before Valentina. Many others. I compartmentalized infidelity as separate from my marriage, the way my father taught me to. It was wrong. There's no excuse. Do you still see them? Any of them? No. I've had no contact with anyone since you left. That part of my life is over. She verified. Through her own sources, through careful observation, through the kind of quiet investigation that felt paranoid but necessary. Everything checked out. Slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice it happening, her walls began to lower. Juliana turned too. Her party was larger this year. More friends. More family. The expanded social circle of a woman who'd rebuilt her life from ruins. Ricardo was there from the beginning, not as a carefully timed guest but as a co-host. Partner in celebration. They worked together seamlessly. Coordinating food, managing excited toddlers, handling the small crises that birthday parties inevitably produced. They moved around each other with the comfort of people who'd relearned each other's rhythms. "You two seem good," Alessia's mother observed quietly. "We're better. Getting there. I still don't trust him." "I know. But you're happy. Happier than you've been since you left him. Maybe happier than you were even before." Her mother squeezed her hand. "Just be careful, darling. That's all I ask." "I'm always careful now." That night, after the party ended and Juliana was sleeping off her sugar high, Ricardo lingered. "I should go," he said, without moving toward the door. "You should. Unless you want me to stay." The question hung between them. It was the first time he'd tested a boundary. The first time he'd pushed past the careful friendship they'd been rebuilding toward something more. Alessia's heart hammered. "I want you to stay," she heard herself say. "For a drink. Just a drink. Just a drink." She poured wine. They sat on her couch, the same couch where she'd sobbed for hours after leaving him, now just furniture again, and talked. About Juliana. About work. About the future they might be building together, one cautious step at a time. At some point his hand found hers. She didn't pull away. The touch was electric. Familiar and strange at the same time. The ghost of 1,000 touches overlaid with the weight of everything that had happened since. "I've missed this," he murmured. "Just being close to you. Not asking for anything. Just present. I've missed it too." The admission cost her something, but the cost felt worth paying. "Alessia, don't." She squeezed his hand. "Don't push. Let's just have this moment. Just this." "Okay." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the city lights through her window. It wasn't forgiveness. Wasn't reconciliation. Wasn't anything that could be easily labeled. But it was real. And for now, real was enough. 3 months later, she let him kiss her. It happened naturally, so naturally that it almost felt inevitable. They'd been laughing about something Juliana had said. Their faces close, and suddenly the laughter faded and he was looking at her the way he used to look at her, and she was leaning in, and the kiss was soft, questioning. Nothing like the hungry passion they'd shared in their marriage. But it was also honest, present. A kiss between two people who'd fought through devastation and chosen to try again. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for 2 years," he admitted. "I know. Was it okay?" It was okay. More than okay. But she wasn't ready to say that. Wasn't ready to give him that much yet. He seemed to understand. "I'll go now," he said, "before I push my luck." Probably wise. He kissed her forehead, gentle, reverent, and left. Alessia touched her lips, still tingling from the contact, and wondered if she was making a terrible mistake or the bravest decision of her life. The months that followed were a careful dance. Progress, then retreat. Intimacy, then distance. Two people learning to trust again while knowing exactly how much damage that trust could cause if misplaced. They went on dates, real dates, the kind that required babysitters and reservations and the nervous anticipation of new romance. They talked endlessly. About their marriage, about what had gone wrong, about what they would do differently if they got another chance. They disagreed, argued, said things in anger that they later apologized for. But they kept showing up. Every day, every week, every difficult conversation that would have been easier to avoid. And slowly the trust rebuilt. Not the blind trust of their first marriage. Alessia would never be that naive again. But something more mature, more resilient. Trust that had been tested and survived. The night everything shifted was an ordinary Tuesday. Juliana was at Alessia's mother's house for a sleepover, the first time their daughter had been away overnight since the divorce. The apartment felt strangely empty without her constant presence. Ricardo came over for dinner. They cooked together, a new skill they developed during their cautious reconciliation. The kitchen was warm with steam and spices and the comfortable banter of people who'd relearned how to be easy around each other. After dinner, wine. After wine, conversation that drifted from practical matters to memories. The good ones they'd almost forgotten existed beneath the weight of bad ones. "Do you remember our second anniversary?" he asked. "The trip to Positano? I remember you getting seasick on the ferry." "I was not seasick. I was contemplatively quiet." "You turned green. A dignified shade of green." She laughed. Really laughed, the kind of laughter that came from genuine joy rather than politeness. He watched her laugh with wonder on his face. "I'd forgotten," he said softly. "Forgotten what?" "The sound of your real laugh. Not the careful one. The one that means you've actually forgotten to be guarded around me." She stopped laughing, suddenly conscious of exactly what she'd revealed. But instead of retreating, she chose to stay present. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I want this to work. I want to believe you've changed. But every time I let myself relax, part of me is waiting for the other shoe to drop." "That's reasonable. It's exhausting. Also reasonable. How do we move forward when I can't stop waiting for you to hurt me again?" He considered the question seriously, the way he considered everything she said these days. "Maybe we don't try to eliminate the fear," he said finally. "Maybe we just acknowledge it. Let it exist alongside everything else we're building. You might be waiting for me to hurt you for years. Maybe forever. I can't fix that. I can only keep not hurting you until the evidence outweighs the fear. That's a lot of pressure on you. I caused the damage. Repairing it is my responsibility. What if you get tired? What if you decide the work isn't worth it?" "You're worth it." He said it simply, without drama. "Juliana is worth it. The family we could still be is worth it. I'll never get tired." She searched his face for doubt, for calculation, for any sign that he was saying what she wanted to hear rather than what he actually felt. She found nothing but sincerity. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "Then believe me." He reached for her hand. "Not blindly, not naively. Just believe me enough to keep trying. That's all I'm asking." She looked at their intertwined hands. His still marked with the tattoos that had once thrilled her and then repulsed her and now just seemed like part of who he was. "Okay," she said, and leaned in to kiss him. This kiss was different. Not soft, not questioning. Something had shifted, some barrier finally crumbling, and what emerged was hunger. The kind they'd buried under grief and betrayal and careful reconstruction. His hands found her waist. Her fingers tangled in his hair. They kissed like people who'd been starving for contact and finally allowed themselves to eat. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, his forehead pressed against hers. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. "Tell me to leave. I will. Whatever you need. Stay." The word escaped before she could second-guess it. His eyes searched hers. "Are you sure?" Was she sure? No. She might never be sure again, not about anything involving him. But certainty wasn't required for courage. "I'm sure I want this. I'm sure I want you. Everything else we'll figure out later." He kissed her again, deeper, more intentional, and she stopped thinking about sure and later and just let herself feel. She woke the next morning in her bed, sunlight streaming through curtains, Ricardo's arm heavy across her waist. For a moment, she forgot everything that had happened between them. Forgot the betrayal, the divorce, the long months of careful rebuilding. She was just a woman waking next to the man she loved. Then memory returned. She tensed, waiting for regret to crash over her. It didn't come. What came instead was something like peace. Fragile, tentative, but real. The sense that a door had opened to a new chapter. Not the erasure of the old one, but the beginning of something different. "You're thinking very loudly," Ricardo murmured, his eyes still closed. "I'm processing." "Good processing or bad processing?" She considered. "Good, I think. Mostly." He opened his eyes, turning to face her. In the morning light, he looked younger than usual, less guarded. The vulnerability she'd spent months searching for, finally visible on his face. "No regrets?" he asked. "Ask me in a few hours." "That's not reassuring. It's honest." She touched his face, the stubble along his jaw, the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there when they married. "I don't know what this means yet. I don't know what we are now. But I know I didn't make a mistake last night." "That's enough." He kissed her palm. "That's more than enough." The months that followed tested them in new ways, living separately but building something together, introducing Juliana to the reality of parents who might be more than co-parents, navigating the judgment of family and friends who weren't sure what to make of their reconciliation. Ricardo moved slowly, always deferring to Alessia's pace. She appreciated the patience even when it frustrated her. They didn't hide what was happening, but they didn't announce it either. Let people draw their own conclusions from shared dinners and lingering glances and the way they'd started finishing each other's sentences again. "This is dangerous," her best friend warned. "You're setting yourself up to be hurt again. Maybe. Or maybe I'm giving myself a chance at the life I actually want. With him? After everything. With who he's becoming. That's different from who he was. Is it different enough?" Alessia didn't have an answer. She only had hope. The proposal, when it came, was nothing like their first engagement. No elaborate restaurant. No expensive ring. No performative display designed to demonstrate wealth and power. Just the three of them, Alessia, Ricardo, and Juliana. In the living room of her apartment on a random Sunday afternoon, Juliana was playing with blocks. Ricardo was helping her build a tower. Alessia was reading nearby, enjoying the domestic peace that had become surprisingly normal. Then Ricardo looked up and said, quite casually, "Marry me again." She blinked. "Excuse me? Marry me again. Not because you have to. Not because of the baby. She's already here. Just because you want to. Because I love you and you love me and we fought too hard to rebuild this not to see it through." "That's a terrible proposal." "It's an honest one." She looked at him. This man who had broken her heart and spent 3 years trying to mend it. This man who had changed in ways she'd never believed possible. This man who still wore his darkness like armor but had learned to let her see through it. "Ask me properly." A smile spread across his face. The real smile, the one she'd almost forgotten existed. He rose from the floor, leaving Juliana happily smashing blocks, and crossed to kneel before her. "Alessia Bellini, I don't deserve you. I never have. But I've spent 3 years trying to become someone who might, someday, be worthy of the love you've given me. I want to spend the rest of my life continuing that work. Will you marry me?" "What about a ring?" "In my pocket." I wasn't sure I'd have the courage to ask, but I've been carrying it for 3 months just in case. He pulled out a box. Inside, a simple band of white gold. No giant diamond, nothing ostentatious. Just elegant simplicity. Nothing like the ring he'd given her before. Everything like the relationship they'd become. "Yes," she said. The word felt like freedom. The wedding was small. Just family and close friends, gathered in a garden outside Milan on a clear spring afternoon. Juliana served as flower girl, toddling down the aisle with determined concentration, scattering petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Alessia wore white again, not because she was pretending to be a bride for the first time, but because she wanted to, because this wedding was something new, not a continuation of the old one. Ricardo waited at the altar, his dark suit immaculate, his tattoos visible as always. The neck, the forearms, the knuckles. Symbols of who he was, who he would always be in some ways. But the man wearing those tattoos had changed. She could see it in his eyes as she walked toward him. The vulnerability, the gratitude, the absolute determination to honor his promises this time. "You look terrified," she murmured when she reached him. "I am terrified. Terrified I'll somehow mess this up. Terrified I'll wake up tomorrow and discover this was all a dream." "It's not a dream. Prove it." So she did. She married him again, speaking vows they'd written together. Honest vows, acknowledging their history, promising to do better. I will trust you, she said. Not because trust comes easily, but because you've earned it. I will honor you, he said. Not because I'm incapable of failure, but because I choose every day to be the man you deserve. I will build a family with you, she said. Not because fairy tales are real, but because we've already survived the hardest parts. I will love you, he said. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but completely. For the rest of my life. When the officiant pronounced them married, when Ricardo kissed her and Juliana cheered and everyone applauded, Alessia felt something she hadn't felt in years. Wholeness. Not the naive wholeness of their first marriage, built on illusions and blind trust. Something stronger, something tested, something earned. The reception was joyful chaos. Food and music and dancing, the kind of celebration they'd both avoided during their first wedding, which had been a formal affair designed to impress rather than enjoy. This time they danced. Really danced, holding each other close, swaying to music while their daughter tried to join in and various relatives attempted to photograph everything. Are you happy? Ricardo asked, his lips close to her ear. Yes. No qualifications? No mostly or I think so? No qualifications. Just yes. He pulled back to look at her face, his dark eyes searching hers. The tattoo on his neck, Famiglia Soprattutto, seemed different now. Not hypocritical. Not ironic. True. I'm going to spend the rest of my life earning this, he said. I know. And if I ever hurt you again, you won't. But if I do, then we'll deal with it. Together. Like we've dealt with everything else. It wasn't naive optimism. It was realistic hope. The kind that acknowledged the possibility of failure without being paralyzed by it. They had survived betrayal. They had survived divorce. They had survived the long, painful process of rebuilding trust from rubble. Whatever came next, they would survive that too. Together. 2 years later, their son was born. Marco Riccardo Moretti entered the world on a rainy November morning, loud and healthy, and already showing signs of his father's stubborn determination. Ricardo held his son for the first time and cried openly. Something the old Ricardo would never have allowed. Juliana, now 4, observed her baby brother with suspicious fascination. He's loud, she announced. You were loud too, Alessia reminded her. Was not. Was definitely. The family they'd fought for was complete now. Different from what Alessia had imagined on her first wedding day. Messier, harder, earned rather than given. Better. So much better. Years passed. Marco grew. Juliana grew. The family they'd rebuilt continued to strengthen, tested occasionally by life's inevitable challenges, but never broken. Ricardo kept his promises. Every single one. The business transformed under his new leadership. Still powerful, still formidable, but cleaner. More legitimate. Something his children wouldn't have to be ashamed of. Alessia kept her guard up at first, then gradually, almost without noticing, let it down. Not because she'd forgotten what he'd done. She would never forget. But because the man he'd become had proven, day after day and year after year, that he was worthy of the trust she'd risked giving him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, their second wedding, the real one, they returned to the garden where they'd remarried. The kids were with Alessia's mother, giving them a rare evening alone. They walked the same paths they'd walked that day, remembering vows and flowers and Juliana's chaotic flower girl performance. Do you ever regret it? Ricardo asked. Regret what? Giving me another chance. Sometimes I wonder if you look at me and still see the man who destroyed everything. Alessia considered the question seriously. He deserved that. Sometimes, she admitted. Not often anymore. But sometimes, when you're late coming home or you take a call in another room, I feel it. The old fear. The waiting for betrayal. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's not your fault. I mean, it is your fault originally. But the ongoing vigilance is just how my brain works now. I've made peace with it. Has the fear ever been confirmed? In 10 years? No. Does that help? It does. She stopped walking, turning to face him. I don't regret it. I don't regret any of it. Even the hard parts. Even the nights I wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake. Because this, she gestured at everything around them, at the garden and the evening and the life they'd built. This is worth fighting for, worth surviving for. I don't deserve you. You've said that before. I'll keep saying it. For the rest of my life. She kissed him, soft and sure and full of everything they'd become. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. I love you, he said. Not the way I loved you before, which was selfish and possessive and broken. I love you now. The real you, the strong you, the woman who survived everything I did to her and somehow found it in herself to try again. I love you too. The words came easily now. Not because you're perfect, because you chose to change. And you keep choosing every day. That matters more than perfection ever could. They stood there as the sun set, two people who had destroyed each other and rebuilt themselves, stronger than before. Not a fairy tale. Something better. Something real. The story of Riccardo and Alessia Moretti didn't end with a perfect finale or a guarantee of forever. It ended the way all real love stories end, in progress. In the daily choice to show up, to try, to do better than the day before. Betrayal had broken them. Love, the hard kind, the kind that required work and patience and the courage to be vulnerable, had put them back together. Not the same as before. Changed. Scarred. But whole. Their daughter Juliana would grow up knowing that families could survive impossible things. Their son Marco would learn that strength meant admitting failure and working to overcome it. And they would continue, Riccardo and Alessia, the Mafia boss and the woman who'd walked away, choosing each other, every day, for the rest of their lives. Because love, it turned out, wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about having the courage to fix them, and the grace to let yourself be fixed in return. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more stories like this one.